Hi, welcome to the YouTube Libertarian Solution videocast. I didn't have any question that I wanted to answer today specifically, but I did have something, at least not that came from an email from anyone, but I did have something that I wanted to talk about that I think is definitely a hot issue right now, especially in Arizona. It's immigration. And this will probably end up being a multi-parter because there is so much to cover in this, and I don't think I can cram this into YouTube's 10-minute limit, so it's probably going to be about 2 or 3 parts worth, and they'll be released pretty much in sequence, so you can watch all of them if you'd like to. The first thing that I want to talk about with regards to immigration was to try and narrow down, first of all, what the problem is, because there's this whole issue of we've got to secure the border, especially coming from the conservative side of things. We've got to secure the border, we've got to deport people, we've got to create a path to citizenship, we've got whatever it is. We want to first figure out what are the issues that we're trying to solve. So we've got to consider a couple of questions. First, I think it's important to talk about why people come to the U.S., legal or illegal. Why do people come to this country? Why do they immigrate to the United States? The next thing is it good or is it not good that people come here, whether they come here from any particular method? And in terms of whether or not it's good, does it matter whether or not it's legal or illegal? So for instance, if someone comes here and they go through the process and they end up working and taking a job, or if someone comes here illegally and they end up working and taking a job, does it make a difference that they came here legally or not in terms of for practical purposes, or is that pretty much just a dent to our collective pride if we say that people are coming here and breaking our laws? Is there a real problem with that, or is that just like, well, you've harmed my ego? So we've got to figure out if there's really an issue with that. So I think there's a couple of important questions to consider when trying to figure out what's really the problem, what's going on. So the first thing I would do is I would look at the process of what it takes for someone to come here legally, because if there's a process to come here legally and yet millions of people come here illegally without going through that process, I think it's important to understand why, and the first place to start with that is to figure out, well, what does it take to come here legally? So there's a small list of qualifications that someone has to meet, at least one of these essentially, or criteria rather. The first one that will qualify someone as becoming a permanent resident, legally living in the United States, living and working, is to have an immediate relative, such as a spouse or a parent, who is a citizen who can sponsor you. The second is to have an employer sponsor you for a job, but only after they've gone through a lengthy labor certification process whereby it must be first demonstrated that you are uniquely qualified for the position and the company cannot find an American to do the job. You could be a researcher with international recognition in your field. You could be an extraordinary individual at the pinnacle of your field, whatever extraordinary means in the INS's view. You could apply for a job of national interest, and that could be at the whims of whatever the federal government considers to be interested in that time. Maybe it's global warming research. Or you can enter the green card lottery, whereby a small hand of applicants are chosen at random. I think it's 50,000 every year, are chosen at random for green cards. But of course, not all countries apply. Not all countries are applicable to apply for the green card lottery. Mexico is one of the countries that's not. So if you're a Mexican, you cannot apply for the green card lottery and come into the U.S. that way. Or you can request political asylum because the political system in your home country is so oppressive that you fear for your life. Maybe if you're fleeing from Iraq or Iran or something like that, that would work. Fleeing from Mexico, they don't take asylum from that, so that doesn't work. So really, if you look at those options there are a small handful of ways that someone can come into the country legally and live here and work here as a permanent resident. Now, most people, if you were trying to figure out who that applies to, that doesn't apply to most people. That applies to a small handful of people. If you look at the average Mexican, let's say, because, really this is the southern border that everyone's up in arms about, not the northern border, not the western or eastern coasts. It's the southern border, so Mexico really is the issue that we're looking at here. The average Mexican does not fall into one of these categories. They are not a researcher with international recognition. They are not they're not an extraordinary individual at the pinnacle of their field. Most of them are not marrying U.S. citizens. They can't qualify for asylum or for the green card lottery. So how can a Mexican come to the U.S. legally if they want to move here, live here, and work here, raise their family here, and completely carry their own weight? Well, in most cases they can't. It's impossible. So that would probably answer the question as far as why people come here legally. Now, I think, as an American, I would think anyway that that's flattering, that people are willing to go to such great lengths to come to this country because of how wonderful it is, and the opportunities that are here. Of course, it's becoming less and less wonderful every day, but you know, relative to a lot of other places, it's pretty great. And to me, that would seem kind of flattering that people want to come here and they go through such, they take such, they go through such pain, through such a process to move here, even illegally, because they recognize the opportunities that Americans have and that people who are living in the United States have, and they want a piece of that action. And that really is something you can't blame someone for. You know, if I can work in the U.S. and make $10, $15, $20 an hour, or I can work in Mexico and make, you know, $2 an hour, and the corrupt police are going to steal half of that from me, you know, the choice seems pretty clear. So I think that pretty much answers the question of why people come here illegally. It seems pretty obvious. That's one of the reasons. Of course, there are other reasons why people come here illegally, which we'll definitely address. There's the people who want free handouts. There are the drug runners. There are potentially are terrorists. There's all sorts of reasons why people would come here illegally. Of course, if someone's running drugs through here, they're probably not going to be applying for a green card or a visa of any sort, or getting any kind of permission from the government to come here. So what I think we've covered the vast amount of people by saying that we're looking at the process of coming here legally as being extremely difficult, as far as that being the reason why people come here illegally. Now, of course, there are people who come here because they want free handouts. That would probably be the next biggest thing. That's not the majority of them. About 24% of immigrants, illegal and legal combined, are on some kind of government subsidy. Now, that's just under 1/4, but that's not significantly more than the number of U.S. citizens that are on the public dole to some degree, which is 16%. So there are certainly people that want to live off the public, want to live off taxpayer-funded services, and that's an issue. Of course, there are also citizens who want to live off taxpayer-funded services. There are citizens who have never worked a day in their life, who have never contributed into the system, but who are living off the system. So to me, this doesn't really seem like an immigration issue. This seems more like an economic issue. And, you know, the simple answer, of course, is to get rid of taxpayer-funded services, and that we don't have people living at the expense of other people. But if we want to focus on just the immigration part of it, that also seems very simple. If you're not a citizen, then you can't get taxpayer-funded services. I'm not sure why that's so difficult. If you want to move to this country, whether legally or illegally, you don't have access to welfare, you don't have access to unemployment, you don't have access to public education, you don't have access to anything that is funded by taxpayers. Seems pretty simple. So I would probably start there to alleviate that concern, where the idea being that, well, people come here because they want free handouts. No problem. Let's get rid of the free handouts. That way, the people that are coming here are not the ones that want free handouts because they know that if they come here, they don't get them. They are the people that are coming here for other reasons, primarily because they're looking for better opportunities. So I think that's definitely something important to look at. Now, there's also the other economic issue, which is, well, if they come here, they're going to take our jobs. It reminds me of that South Park episode. Anyway, that's a very, I don't know, very kindergarten version of economics looking at it. Like, if someone moves, like there's a fixed number of jobs, and if someone moves here from another country, then they're going to take that job, and therefore there is one less job available for an American. Well, first of all, that doesn't really have anything to do with whether immigration is legal or not, because legal immigrants can take jobs too, and from what I understand from conservatives, they say we don't have any issue with legal immigration. We welcome that. We want more of that. We have an issue with illegal immigration. So taking of jobs, well, anybody can take anybody's job. I mean, you could have a job at $10 an hour. I could go to your employer and say, I'll do it for 8, and then you're fired and I'm hired. So, assuming all the other qualifications are equal, of course. So this really also is not an immigration issue. But again, it's a very kindergarten version of economics, because when someone moves to this country, they're not only taking a job, they're not only producing, but they're also consuming. They're also placing a demand on the economy. The person that moves here has to eat, so someone has to work to provide food for them. That person has to wear clothes, so someone works to produce clothes for them. That person has to be transported, whether it's driving or taxis or any other kind of transportation. That person has to live somewhere. So in addition to taking a job slot, I guess you could call it, filling a job slot, they're also creating more job slots because they're putting an additional demand on the economy. So their needs have to be fulfilled for, and of course fulfilled for by they earn money from their job and then they pay for those things, which creates more jobs. So you really don't have a net loss of jobs when you got people moving here. In fact, if you wanted to fix the economic issues right now, the best thing to do would be to have a flood of young and able labor coming to this country. That would really solve a lot of the economic issues, because we'd have a much greater demand on the economy. We'd have a much greater production, because of course we've lost a lot of our production to other countries because of our overregulation. Separate issue. But anyway, that covers part one of the immigration topic right now. I'm going to get into other things like drugs and amnesty and all sorts of things in part two. We'll see you then.